The backup alarm screamed through the pre-dawn darkness as I reversed the massive Caterpillar generator truck down the narrow access road toward my ranch house. 40 tons of diesel-powered vengeance rumbled beneath me, its industrial engine drowning out the shouts from the HOA president standing in my driveway. Karen Whitfield clutched her bathrobe tight against the October wind, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled as she screamed something about permits and noise ordinances. But I couldn't hear her over the beautiful sound of 500 kilowatts spinning up to full power. Behind me, through the bedroom window, I could see the faint glow of medical equipment coming back online. My wife Sarah's ventilator resumed its steady rhythm. The oxygen concentrator hummed back to life, and the hospital bed's monitoring systems blinked reassuringly in the darkness. Karen had made one critical mistake. When she ordered the power company to cut my electricity at 3 a.m., she'd messed with a sick woman's life support equipment. And now, she was about to learn exactly what happens when you threaten a retired power plant engineer's family. The generator settled into position with a hydraulic hiss, and I threw the main transfer switch. Every light in the house blazed to life, illuminating Karen's horrified face as she realized her petty power play had just backfired spectacularly. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and I'm a 58-year-old former power plant engineer who spent 35 years keeping the lights on for half of Colorado. When Sarah was diagnosed with late-stage COPD 18 months ago, I took early retirement so I could care for her full-time. The doctors said she needed round-the-clock oxygen therapy and monitoring, so I converted our master bedroom into a mini medical facility with backup battery systems and redundant power supplies. I thought I'd planned for every contingency except one: a vindictive HOA president with a personal vendetta. Our ranch sits on 12 acres in Meadowbrook Estates, a community that was originally built around actual working ranches back in the 1970s. When we bought the property 15 years ago, it was still largely agricultural, with loose HOA rules that mainly covered shared road maintenance and fire prevention. The CC were reasonable, the dues were minimal, and everyone pretty much minded their own business. That changed 3 years ago when Karen Whitfield moved into the development's largest house, a gaudy McMansion on a 2-acre lot that she'd somehow convinced the previous board to approve despite clear architectural guidelines. Karen was a recently divorced real estate agent from California who'd cashed out during the housing boom and decided to recreate Newport Beach in rural Colorado. She immediately ran for HOA president on a platform of modernizing our community standards and won by exactly 3 votes after most residents didn't bother to show up for the election. Her first order of business was hiring a property management company from Denver to handle enforcement and compliance. Suddenly, homeowners were getting fined for mailbox colors, grass height, and having more than 2 vehicles visible from the street. Karen justified the increased fees and fines by claiming she was protecting property values, but it was clear she just enjoyed wielding power over her neighbors. The conflict between us started innocently enough. Sarah loves gardening, and even with her oxygen tank, she insisted on maintaining a small vegetable plot behind our house. The garden wasn't visible from any street or neighboring property, but Karen somehow discovered it during one of her compliance walks and sent us a violation notice, claiming that vegetable gardens violated the community's residential aesthetic standards. I politely explained that the CC rupees specifically allowed small personal gardens for household use, and that our tomatoes and squash were completely hidden from view. Karen responded by hiring a surveyor to prove our garden extended 3 feet beyond our property line into the common area. The survey showed she was wrong, but by then she'd already issued a $500 fine and threatened daily penalties until we remediated the violation. That's when I realized Karen wasn't interested in rules or property values. She was collecting scalps, and Sarah's garden was just her opening move in a larger campaign to establish dominance over every property in Meadowbrook Estates. Over the next 18 months, Karen's harassment campaign escalated systematically. She started with nuisance violations, fining us for leaving garbage cans visible for more than 4 hours after pickup, claiming our porch light was excessively bright, and demanding we repaint our mailbox to match a color palette that didn't exist when we bought the house. Each violation came with a $200 fine and a 10-day cure period, followed by $50 daily penalties if we didn't comply. When I pushed back by citing the actual CC rupees, Karen hired a lawyer to draft new, clarifying amendments that retroactively made our existing landscaping, outbuildings, and even our truck non-compliant. She called special board meetings with 48-hour notice, knowing that working families couldn't attend, then passed her amendments with votes from her hand-picked cronies. The real escalation began when Sarah's condition worsened last spring. Her oxygen requirements increased, and I had to install a larger concentrator and backup ventilator system. The medical equipment required a dedicated 240-volt circuit, so I hired a licensed electrician to run new service from our main panel. The work was completely internal, didn't require permits, and wasn't visible from outside our house. Karen somehow learned about the electrical work and immediately filed a complaint with the county claiming I was operating an unlicensed medical facility without proper zoning approval. When the county inspector arrived, he quickly determined that home medical equipment didn't require special permits. But Karen appealed his decision and demanded a full review by the Planning Commission. While that frivolous appeal wound through the bureaucracy, Karen escalated to direct intimidation. She started parking in front of our house during Sarah's physical therapy sessions, claiming she was monitoring compliance issues. She filed noise complaints about our backup generator's weekly test runs, even though they occurred during permitted daytime hours. Most vindictively, she convinced the fire department to inspect our medical facility for code violations, forcing Sarah to be disconnected from her equipment for 3 hours, while inspectors confirmed what I'd already told them: everything was properly installed and up to code. The harassment campaign reached its peak last month when Karen discovered that our property deed included mineral and water rights that predated the HOA by 40 years. Under Colorado law, those rights were protected and couldn't be restricted by community covenants. More importantly, they included easement access for utility maintenance, which meant the HOA couldn't legally prevent necessary infrastructure modifications. When I politely explained this to Karen during a board meeting, citing the specific statutes and court precedents, she went ballistic. She accused me of being a legal troublemaker who was undermining community harmony. 2 days later, she convinced the board to pass an emergency resolution, giving her authority to take immediate action to protect community interests during ongoing legal disputes. I should have seen the next move coming, but I underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go. On the 15th of October, she filed a formal complaint with Rocky Mountain Power, claiming that my medical equipment installation violated community electrical codes and posed a fire hazard to neighboring properties. She included photos she'd taken by trespassing on our property, falsified reports about suspicious electrical modifications, and a petition signed by 3 board members demanding immediate service disconnection. The power company, faced with potential liability and a complaint from an HOA president, decided to err on the side of caution. They scheduled a disconnection for the 20th of October, giving us exactly 72 hours notice to resolve the compliance issues or lose electrical service. I spent those 3 days preparing for war. As a power plant engineer, I knew exactly how utility disconnections worked and what my legal options were. More importantly, I knew something Karen didn't. I had a trump card that would turn her petty power play into a catastrophic mistake. First, I called my attorney, David Chang, who specialized in utility, law, and property rights. David confirmed what I already suspected: Karen's complaint was legally frivolous. The power company's disconnection was improper. and we had grounds for both an emergency injunction and a substantial lawsuit, but legal remedies take time, and Sarah couldn't survive even a few hours without her medical equipment. Next, I contacted Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Sarah's pulmonologist, and explained the situation. Dr. Martinez was furious that an HOA president would endanger a patient's life over a personal dispute. She immediately provided medical documentation certifying that any interruption of Sarah's oxygen therapy would constitute a life-threatening emergency, and she reported Karen's actions to the state medical board as potential interference with patient care. But my ace in the hole came from an unexpected source, my former employer, Rocky Mountain Energy Solutions. When I retired, my supervisor had mentioned that they kept a fleet of portable generators for emergency power restoration after storms and equipment failures. These weren't small residential units, they were industrial-grade diesel generators capable of powering entire neighborhoods. I called my old colleague Jim Patterson and explained the situation. Jim was horrified that someone would cut power to medical equipment and immediately offered to help. Within 2 hours, he'd arranged for a 500 kilowatt T Caterpillar generator truck to be delivered to my ranch, complete with an emergency services operator classification that exempted it from noise ordinances and HOA restrictions. The best part, since my property included utility easement rights, the generator truck could legally park anywhere necessary to provide emergency power service, and under Colorado's medical emergency statutes, anyone who interfered with life support equipment faced potential criminal charges for reckless endangerment. I spent the 19th of October quietly making final preparations. I installed a transfer switch system that would allow seamless switching between utility power and generator backup. I documented Sarah's medical requirements and our property rights. Most importantly, I set up security cameras to record everything that was about to happen. Karen had no idea she was walking into a trap of her own, At exactly 3:17 a.m. on the 20th of October, Rocky Mountain Power cut our electrical service. Sarah's ventilator immediately switched to battery backup, giving us about 4 hours before the batteries would be exhausted. The oxygen concentrator shut down completely, leaving her dependent on portable tanks that would last maybe 6 hours. I called 911 and reported a medical emergency caused by illegal utility disconnection. Then I called Jim Patterson's emergency number. The generator truck was already staged at a nearby truck stop, and the operator had been monitoring our situation all night. At 3:22 a.m., I called David Chang's emergency line and reported that Karen's actions had created an immediate threat to Sarah's life. David contacted the duty judge and filed for an emergency restraining order, but we both knew that wouldn't help Sarah breathe tonight. At 3:25 a.m., the generator truck's backup alarm echoed across Meadowbrook Estates as 40 tons of diesel-powered Justice rumbled down our quiet street. The industrial Caterpillar engine could be heard for half a mile, and every house in the development lit up as residents woke to investigate the commotion. Karen appeared on our driveway in her bathrobe, screaming about noise ordinances and demanding that I shut down the illegal generator. She threatened to call the police, the fire department, and the county commissioner. What she didn't realize was that I'd already called them myself. The first patrol car arrived at 3:31 a.m., followed immediately by a fire department ambulance, responding to our medical emergency call. When Officer Bradley asked what was happening, I calmly explained that someone had illegally cut power to my wife's life support equipment, forcing me to arrange emergency backup power to prevent her death. Karen interrupted, claiming she had authority to disconnect non-compliant electrical service and demanding that the police remove the illegal generator. That's when Officer Bradley asked to see her authorization for cutting power to medical equipment. Karen couldn't produce any authorization because she didn't have any. Rocky Mountain Power had acted on her complaint, but she had no legal authority to order utility disconnections. When Officer Bradley learned that Sarah was on life support and that Karen had deliberately targeted our medical equipment, his demeanor changed dramatically. At 3, 4, 5 a.m., as the generator settled into its steady 800 revolutions per minute rhythm, and our house blazed with restored power, Officer Bradley placed Karen under arrest for reckless endangerment and filing false reports. The charges were felonies under Colorado law, carrying potential prison sentences and mandatory restitution for damages. But the real fireworks started when the other residents of Meadowbrook Estates began arriving to see what the commotion was about. Karen had spent 3 years terrorizing her neighbors with fines, liens, and harassment. Now they watched as she was handcuffed in her driveway at 4 a.m., finally facing consequences for her actions. Mrs. Rodriguez from Lot 15 started applauding. Then Mr. Patterson from Lot 8 joined in. Within minutes, 30 neighbors had gathered to watch Karen's perp walk, many of them recording video on their phones. 3 years of accumulated resentment erupted in spontaneous celebration as the community's tormentor was finally held accountable. The generator truck ran for 18 hours while Rocky Mountain Power restored our service and conducted a full investigation of Karen's complaint. When their engineers confirmed that our electrical installation was completely legal and properly permitted, the utility company apologized profusely and agreed to cover all costs related to the wrongful disconnection. Karen Whitfield's reign of terror ended that October morning, but the consequences continued for months. The felony charges stuck reckless endangerment for targeting life support equipment and filing false reports with a utility company. She pleaded guilty in December and received 18 months supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $15,000 fine split between court costs and restitution to us. The civil lawsuit was even more satisfying. David Chang filed suit against Karen personally. The HOA board and the property management company for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with medical care. The case settled out of court for $125. Ling, with Karen's homeowner's insurance covering most of the payout after determining that her actions weren't covered under the HOA's liability policy. Rocky Mountain Power conducted their own investigation and concluded that Karen had provided false information to obtain the service disconnection. They filed a formal complaint with the State Public Utilities Commission, and Karen was barred from ever again requesting utility actions on behalf of property owners. The State Medical Board took Dr. Martinez's complaint seriously and opened an investigation into Karen's interference with patient care. While they couldn't directly sanction a non-medical person, they referred the case to the district attorney's office, which resulted in additional charges for endangering a vulnerable adult. Most satisfyingly, the Meadowbrook Estates community held an emergency meeting 2 weeks after Karen's arrest and voted unanimously to remove her as HOA president. They also voted to terminate the property management company, roll back all of Karen's punitive rule changes, and return to the original CC rupees that had governed the community for decades. Karen tried to stay in the community after her legal troubles, but the social ostracism was complete. No one would speak to her. Contractors refused to work on her property, and even the mail carrier treated her with obvious disdain. She put her house on the market in February and moved back to California. Taking a substantial loss on the sale, the 500 kilowatt T generator truck became something of a local legend. Jim Patterson arranged for Rocky Mountain Energy Solutions to donate a smaller emergency generator to our community, ensuring that no resident would ever again face a medical crisis due to power outages. The generator shed bears a small plaque in memory of community cooperation and in honor of those who stand up to bullies. Sarah's health has stabilized with proper medical care and no interference from petty tyrants. Our garden continues to flourish. Our medical equipment runs without harassment, And our neighbors have returned to being actual neighbors, instead of enforcement targets. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or clever tricks, it's simply being prepared when bullies overreach and holding them accountable for their actions. Karen thought she could use utility companies as weapons against her neighbors. But she forgot that some of us actually understand how the system works. The generator truck taught our community an important lesson. When someone threatens the vulnerable among us, we don't negotiate or compromise. We fire up 40 tons of diesel-powered justice and make sure the lights stay on for those who need them most. Karen Whitfield learned that lesson the hard way. At 3:22 a.m., when her petty tyranny met industrial-grade consequences and lost